Hello and welcome to the Pocket Dojo Podcast, the show where we talk about making the world a better place by making better things. I'm Paul Crick.
And I'm Marsha Singh. Today it's Paul's turn to lead the conversation, so let's dive in.
So, Nicky, Dave, thank you so much for being part of this episode of the Pocket Dojo Podcast. And I guess the first thing to ask is, for those who won't know you, perhaps say a little bit about who you are, what your permaculture work is all about, and a little about your business.
All right.
So you can start.
Okay. My name is Nicky.
I'm David.
We are co-founders of Permaculture Gardens. .org. And we help families grow their own food, medicine, and find God in the garden through our courses, programs, speaking engagements for writing a book. We have research, lots of stuff happening on the farm. And more recently, I would say last night, we just wrapped up releasing a software, a permaculture gardening app. So for those of you who don't know what permaculture is, yes, permaculture is.
So permaculture is working with nature instead of against it. So nature is this powerful force that has it's very abundant. It's full of energy. Most agriculture involves us imposing ourselves on nature. So we limit, we simplify the model. You know, nature is quite a complicated system. So in permaculture, the difference is that you're looking at the surrounding environment, the energy and forces and life in the area that you wanted to grow things, and then you tweak things. You kind of manage that so that you're using the life to help you produce abundance. So you do make tweaks. It's not just like you just let things grow, but you're designing things so that they're working most effectively in nature with each other to produce. You get a lot of yields out of that, and then the natural system
It's more efficient.
and it thrives.
It's the most regenerative of regenerative businesses, because in what we do, we always looking at, like Dave was talking about how man imposes some sort of structure or efficiency into developing a product, right, or a service even. And what we try to do in our work and in the gardening work and the way that we teach people to garden is to look at life, look at your garden, look at your eating consumption as a spiral and a seasonal and cyclical even. So you, instead of it being like a supply chain where you're extracting from nature in order to build a toy, for instance, something in China, a car toy, ship it across the world, and it stays in our Walmart big box stores where we purchase it and bring it to our homes, and they stay there for 6 months before we toss them away. We are looking at a system of agriculture, because agriculture can be that way too. We put the chemicals in, we extract the produce, we sell it, and then we don't even eat it, and we toss it into the landfill. We're looking at a cyclical structure where we're bringing back to the earth, and in the beginning, you have a little bit of input, you work with that input, and you create more produce, and from that product coming out, you create more and more abundance with each cycle. And so that spiral just deepens, and it's just like a metaphor for me for my life. Each year better, each day, growing stronger, and also a metaphor for how we deal with the products that we do, with produce rather than consume, also trying to be producers, not just consumers, as the coiner of permaculture, Bill Mollison, used to say.
And when you look in the soil, you realize that that's like the ultimate team, because you have the fungi. I mean, this is only in the last 20 or 30 years that they started to uncover some of this stuff, but you see the fungi are working with the plants, and microorganisms. Sure, there's competition, but there's negotiations and relationships in terms of exchanging nutrients and starches and sugars. And when we come in and kind of wipe out all that life,
Like tilling the soil.
yeah, or
Uh,
applying chemicals
organisms.
or pesticides, then it affects that balance. And that balance has evolved over millions of years. So it's generally more efficient than whatever we can come up with. So we're just trying to promote that. And that generally, the more life you have in your soil, the better yields you get, the better harvests you get from your garden.
Yes, there's nothing quite like picking fresh salad and vegetables out of your garden and cooking them straight away. I remember the first time I did it and cooked it up, and it was like, wow, so that's how it's supposed to taste, is it? So tell me, how on earth did you get into this?
You can tell.
Okay, so our first, when we were newlywed, our first child was diagnosed with failure to thrive. And if you know what that is, it's not growing sufficiently. So whatever we fed her, she was on breast milk and she wasn't growing enough.
From about 8 months to
18 months.
she didn't change her
18
weight.
pounds, it felt
Wow.
like. She was the same size. So she's relatively small. And she was allergic to everything. If you can imagine, peas. She was allergic to beans, bread, so gluten, chicken and eggs, both the chicken and the egg, pork, peas. Yeah, I said that. And nuts.
Flour. Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
And so,
Basically,
so many things. And we were wondering, like, how can this randomly happen? I'm not really generally allergic. I'm allergic to dust mites, and neither was Dave. And so we started questioning the food system because it happened again with our second child. He was allergic to fish and he turned blue in the face at 6 months. And both of them had rashes, extreme eczema on their cheeks. As babies, and that was always concerning, especially for a first-time mom, and a first-time mom who I didn't grow up cooking even. Dave taught me how to cook, so that was double jobs, learning this allergy thing when there was no resources at that point 17 years ago. No, there's one allergy cookbook in the market that I could find in the stores, and now there's just a proliferation of gluten-free this and keto, all the sorts of different diets.
so we had switched to organic,
Little by little.
and that helped with the food allergies. But then at some point we discovered permaculture, so we were
Well, the price of the groceries are now here, especially in the States, are atrocious. But back then, it was, oh my gosh, organic was times 4.
well, you start wondering about the source. Is organic just a label?
Yeah,
But if you slap it on, you replace all natural with organic,
Yeah.
and then continue
Charge
business.
premium.
Yeah.
yes.
So yeah, we discovered. I think it was actually
The British,
British
yes. So the
reality show.
what are they called? They're a British reality show that they started out gardening. He's like a captain, and then he did something like a next reality show,
to
Castle.
live on a farm.
He tried to live on a farm. Yeah.
And you mentioned
The
permaculture.
Strawbridges or something of that sort.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds familiar.
If you
But
guys know.
we just kind of looked up that word, and that opened up this whole world of use cases around the world where people had taken these environments that had been really run down and broken down. Like in China, there was like the Loess Plateau, and it had been strip mined by all the human usage, mismanaged. And then in 5 years of managing it properly using permaculture principles, it's like lush and the life has come back and the trees are everywhere. And it's like,
It's been used to green the deserts of Jordan, where so Dave's teacher in permaculture is married to a Bedouin, and so they are given like the worst land in Jordan,
no rain.
no rainfall, and they were able to take that land, and little by little, year 3, we have pictures of it, how with using the right plants or the right approach, composting, wicking beds, things to do in the dry climates, they're able to bring back the life and make it into an oasis. So it doesn't take a lot. It's just a little nudge, and nature just does its magic.
So that was inspiring for us, and that's kind of like what kicked us off down this path.
Okay. And then how long did it take for you to sort of get really comfortable with permaculture principles and sort of almost discarding the sort of what we might describe as sort of traditional ways of shopping, cooking, consumption?
Well, we failed miserably before we were definitely like, what are we doing wrong? We tried to grow tomatoes and we would get 1 or 2. And then my basil plant died. I couldn't understand that. Of course, I was a black thumb. I didn't know why basil would die in the winter. It was my fault. I felt like it was my fault.
I think it was like a gradual evolution. Like we didn't suddenly immediately become successful at least with our own garden production, but it was a totally different approach. So we try lots of different things, and maybe half of those things would work, and then it was this cycle where it just kept on going. So we used to live in a townhouse which only had a small
Like
postage stamp.
Yeah, like most British gardens are little postage stamp gardens.
So we totally converted that into a food forest. So we put in all kinds of fruit trees and berries,
pears. There's some
herbs. We were growing mushrooms underneath our deck.
You're making me hungry talking about it.
Oh my goodness. Are you yes. What is it going to say? Are you a vegetarian or anything like that? Or?
I wouldn't say no. But what I would say is we're mindful eaters. So we don't eat a lot of red meat, but we still eat meat. My wife will eat fish. But again, from a health point of view, from a creating waste point of view, we're selective in what we eat. We're also mindful of our health. So we're not strict, but we're careful about intake. We try to source goods that haven't traveled in from sort of thousands of miles overseas and that kind of. So local produce is good. When we have time, we grow tomatoes. We haven't grown this year. We've grown potatoes. I mean, my wife's dad was a market gardener, so he was an expert at that, and he knew how to do that and would produce excess fruit and vegetables that he would sell and share with the village, which is great. So she is the green-fingered one. I am the one with the black thumb, and I'm sure at some point I'm going to have to learn how to do all this. Because it seems to me as we start more of these conversations, then as we saw, the supply chain needs to change. The quality of our soil is not going to last much longer in terms of what's capable. Learning around things like no-dig gardening, preparing soil in those ways, and you kind of go, well, why doesn't everybody do that? And I understand the transition. It takes time for large-scale agricultures to sort of transition to go, well, there's a cost and we lose profit and we can't just switch overnight. I get that. But more and more, certainly here in the UK, are starting to embrace it, which I think is encouraging. I think it'll be interesting when we see supermarkets start to encourage people to grow their own produce and help them in that process, as well as providing produce from local farms. Like there's a chain in the UK called Waitrose, and they have their own organic farm that produces a lot of the produce that gets sold through the stores on the one hand, and you have single-use shopping bags, but then all the stuff that they import comes in single-use plastic, and you kind of go, you're making progress, which is great, but there's still a ways to go in terms of what you're doing, and it's very easy to criticize these things until you realize the complexity of the supply chain that sits through it, number one, and number two, you can't just switch it off overnight. If you could, you would. and it's complex. So we know that some organizations are working really hard to try and change their approach to how things arrive and paying attention to food waste and things like that. So it's not going to happen overnight. So so tell me more. So you have a farm, yes?
Yes.
How big
So
is
now
your
we-
farm?
Yeah, we live on,
Oh, what did you say?
How big is your farm?
3 acre. Oh, what is
what's that in
3
square
acres?
meters?
3 acres. 3 acres is good for Europe. Well, certainly for UK. I'll find out what that is in hectares or square
Hectares.
meters. Yeah.
I was
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we learned in the townhouse is that even in a small space, you could generate a significant amount of food that could affect your basically your diet.
Mhm.
We were growing something like 300, 400 pounds of produce in this.
My goodness.
So we realized that if you manage your gardens correctly, there's going to naturally be abundance. So now we kind of have this blank canvas because we were in this constrained space, and now we have all this amazing space to use. So it's a little bit daunting in some ways because you see all the potential, and there's only so much energy that you have to kind of craft that stuff. But on the other respect, it's super rewarding.
It's so exciting living here every day. I always say, like, I think I live in the Shire because it's so beautiful. And now I'm looking at it now. The only thing that isn't Shire-like is the bugs. Like, we have lots of mosquitoes and gnats right now. But I would wanted to say that with what you said earlier, Paul, about the supply chain and changing the narrative around food, it does require a lot of patience. It's like that gardening patience again, because we supply the restaurants around us microgreens. We're microgreens farmers for the most part, except recently one restaurant. Yeah, I've been giving him strawberries, but some neighbors of ours who grow vineyard for wine, it's hard. You can't just ask him to go like overnight, and you've got to change everything and become organic. And it's funny because it honestly, all of the change happens in conversations like this, like these. And what happens is one of his best friends is one of our clients, gardening clients. And I've been teaching at this vineyard high school. I've been teaching high schoolers at this vineyard now for about 2 years. And she said, this year we're going to do it. We're going to tell Doug, who's the vineyard owner, the winemaker, we're going to have a little permaculture test patch. And I just convinced him of this little, and I sent him this video. Do you have any other videos, Nicky? And so it wasn't me. Like, whenever I teach at his place, I can say what I say, and he does chemicals and everything because it's here. They say you can't do it, and sometimes he'll hear what I say, and sometimes he won't be there for the really good bits. And so I don't force it or anything. I'm teaching the kids, but I think it's changes like those, like the people who will listen, they'll come around to it, and they'll move more mountains than you individually can. So. I think that's, in business terms, I think that's the regenerative part of our business too, that's one of its.
Well, I think also it's exciting. I wanted to talk a little bit about the story behind the app, and then a little bit more about what the app does and where people can find it, because again, making individual choices contributes to making the change. So if one person makes the change, okay, it has some impact. But if 1 million people make the same change, that has a massive impact. So tell us a little bit about the story of, what was the idea behind the app, a little bit more about what it helps people to do.
Sure. So we've been practicing, the small scale food forest in our yard, and then we started doing an outdoor classroom at our children's elementary school. And so we got an opportunity to do more and more gardens, and we picked up a lot of best practices and things that worked for us. Some of these were hard learned, but we had a wealth of this information. And so we started off trying to coach people online who were already at the stage where they were motivated to make a change, but they didn't know where to start. So we would kind of guide them through that process of setting up a garden that could provide food throughout the year. And during that process, we found out there were a lot of times where we'd be telling them something about how to set up a system for not quite homesteading, but to get an abundance of food from the gardens. And then we would make some recommendation. Somebody would be like, I wish there was an app for that. We manage that because I'm having trouble with my busy life being able to manage all this information. Mm-hmm. So it kind of made us think, like, me as a software engineer, I was like, oh yeah, that probably would help a lot of people if you could, all the advice that we're giving, if you could kind of wrap that up into an application that would help with that.
And it's also what's special about this, we'd been incubating this for a long time. And I think what's special about it is we're thinking that it's not us as the source of knowledge, but it's like drawing from different people who are using it and them logging their experience and seeing that this variety grows well in this zone or this climate, and then offering it, showing that, seeing that's a variety, that learning from what bugs are in there, or how much you can grow in that space, and
or what varieties work in a specific climate.
Yes.
So one of the aspects, it's not quite there yet, but we have this clear vision of as people log their experiences in the application, that information then becomes part of a knowledge system that everybody can benefit from.
So, for instance, companion planting, what in permaculture we also call those guilds, not just for the vegetable garden where you're pairing tomatoes with marigolds and basil, for instance, but also for your apple orchard, what would grow well under it, deter some of the common diseases of the apple. And so we make the app makes these suggestions to remind you to, like, well, don't forget to put a pollinator in, and don't forget to put, as you go and select your plants. It's one part of it, aside from it reminding you that it's time to start your seeds, or it's time to transplant. Those are also part of the app where it texts you or emails you a reminder about what to do gardening wise. But yeah, it's those are basic functions, are the plant information that's shared, the designer, so how to design gardens in
it's kind of like a visual
regenerative way.
Yeah, so it's like a visual tools, kind of, so that you can create all the aspects of your garden.
Wow, that sounds great.
And then I think a big thing is going to be, it's not there until people start entering in data, but observing the gardens. So you start collecting data points. So you go out each day. We encourage everybody to spend at least 10 or 15 minutes in the garden each day, just to look around. You're not weeding or anything, but you're just kind of observing what are the insects, what are the plants, are there things that you haven't seen that are suddenly showing up. And it's amazing, like, all these little details you start picking out. And if people start logging that information, then they can get they can get a little bit of perspective, because we'll tend to forget. We'll plant the tomatoes and then they'll fail for some reason, but we forget the reason. We try again the next year. And they do the exact same thing.
So it's smart like that. It remembers that data for you. Predicts, yes, helps you learn.
What a fantastic idea. So if people want to find you, find out more about your work, where's the best place for them to come and find out more about permaculture and how to grow their own vegetables and plants?
Well, our website is permaculturegardens.org.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best place. You can sign up for our newsletter. We have blogs. we occasionally will have webinars for gardeners to attend. And we're writing a new book. I'm writing a book.
Great.
And so many things, but that's something about that.
A nice
that's kind
quiet
of,
life then.
Yeah. This is not. Yes. Once the book is done, it's actually done.
Yeah.
So it's just the editing. Now it's with the editors and
Right.
everything. But
Okay.
what I feel like now it's getting into more of a quiet season for us.
We find it recharging as well because we do all this stuff and then we just walk out the door and
Oh yeah.
automatically that's our recharging.
So if
towards
people
that.
want to find out more about the app, because that sounds like something that'd be nice. Certainly want to go and find out more. Where would they look there? Is that on the main website or is that somewhere else?
Yes, so permaculturegardens.org/sage. And that's the name of
Sage.
the app, Sage. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful.
So nice.
Well, Nicky, Dave, I'd love to have you back because obviously cyclically and seasonally we grow different things and you'll have different perspectives through the year as you do that and as you continue to make progress. And obviously when the book gets published and released, we'd love to have you tell us more about that. But for now, can I say thank you so much for coming on the Pocket Dojo and sharing yourselves, your knowledge, your wisdom, and the things you do in the world to make things better by making better things. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us, and you're so welcome, Paul.